Everyone, our recording is in progress, and we are just waiting for a couple of our fellow board members to transition into this room from our prior meetings. We'll just give them one moment, but just wanted to let everyone know we'll be starting in just a second here. Thank you. Just like social media.
Yeah.
New seating chart.
I know.
You have to see last week. Yeah, I know. Everyone was out. Of course, my nap. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Okay, we're just waiting for one more director, but I think we can go ahead and call the meeting to order, and she'll make it in time for her name to be called. So I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Sonoma County Transportation Authority and the Sonoma County Regional Climate Protection Authority. Can we please start with a roll call?
Here.
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 Director Gerard Giudice,
Here.
Director Nasa Hinton,
Oh, thanks.
Director Ariel Kelly,
Here.
Director Todd Lands,
Present.
Director JP Leap,
Here.
Director Sandra Lowe.
Here.
Director Jeff Okrepke,
Here.
Director David Rabbit,
Here.
Director Linda Hopkins.
Present. Great. We have a quorum. And now, and we do not have anyone participating by Zoom today, so we can skip the teleconference disclosures. And we will start with public comments on items not on the regular agenda. And I believe we did receive some public comments that were included and sent to the board members. If you didn't see them, they are in the calendar invite as a link. But we did have a couple comments that were emailed in. And if anyone is here in person, you may approach the podium. Seeing none, we'll go to Zoom. Do we have any members of the public on Zoom wishing to give a non-agenda public comment? Please use the raise hand feature. Do we see, are there any up there? It's very small. Anyone on Zoom? Nope. Okay. And we will move on to the consent calendar. So we have a number of items on the joint SCTA RCPA list. Item 4.1, meeting minutes. Item 4.2, our Form 700 are all due April 1st. Item 4.3 is our SCTCA briefing book. And I will just mention, and maybe Director Cameron will also mention, this briefing book is incredibly helpful. Please use it. It has pretty much links to every major project and item before SCTA, RCPA, as well as the alphabet soup of acronyms and agencies that we work with in all of the major plans. So I highly recommend bookmarking that link somewhere in your life. Item 4.4 is our legislative update, and item 4.5 is planning for the commute platform. This is the RFP for our continuation of the Go Sonoma Commutes program. Those are the joint items. Then we also have a number of items on the SCTA, the STIP exchange, cooperative funding agreement for Healdsburg March Avenue, cooperative agreement with City of Petaluma and Caltrans for the 101 Corona Road overcrossing project, resilient state funding for Route 37, Sears Point to Mare Island, Go Sonoma cooperative funding agreement for our City of Sonoma citywide bicycle and pedestrian improvements project. And then, oh, that's our regular. So those are our items. We don't have any separate RCPA items on the consent calendar. Any members of the public wishing to comment on the consent calendar, please approach the podium. Seeing none, anybody on Zoom? Any comments, abstentions, anything on consent for the board? I'll take a motion.
Make the motion.
We have a motion by Director Cater Thompson and a second by Director Harvey. All those in favor of approving the consent calendar? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Great. And now we're on to the joint items regular calendar, item 5.1. Did I skip over, Director Cameron? Did I skip over your report or it's not on here? No.
It's at the end during exec committee.
Perfect. Okay. So we will start with Chris Barney, item 5.1, our draft comprehensive transportation plan.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Chair Kelly and directors, happy to be here today to provide an update on our draft comprehensive transportation plan, or CTP for short. The tagline for the plan is Sonoma Moves 2050. We've been working on it for the last year and a half to 2 years. So happy to be to this point. We do have a draft released, which we released in January. Excited to provide an update today. So it looks like we're getting going here. Yeah, we're up. Or go into view mode, Don. Yeah, we need to go into presentation mode. Or I can have you scroll us through. Yeah. There we go. All right. Let me get back on track here. So I'd like to start out with what our comprehensive transportation plan is. It's a high-level guiding document that helps guide future funding and long-term planning decisions, identifies priority projects, policies, and programs, and lays out a shared vision for where we'd like our transportation system to go in the future and how we'd like to get there. So there's also a ton of reference material in the plan, including information on key trends, demographics, and transportation data across Sonoma County that your staff here at SCTCA uses on a regular basis, but also local staff on your planning and engineering teams at the local agencies use on their projects. So do want to note a few things about the plan. County plans like our CTP feed projects and information into the regional transportation plan or Plan Bay Area in the region. And this current CTP will inform the next regional plan, which is tentatively named Plan Bay Area 2060. So that's coming up in the future. We're also required to have an updated policy and planning document to guide our transportation programming and funding, and the CTP meets that requirement. So we're covered there. So we update the CTP every 4 to 5 years to make sure it's still relevant and reflects the priorities and goals of you as a board of directors and local jurisdictions. And we build on the lessons learned we acquire from putting together previous plans as part of each update cycle, and incorporate recent public input, new data, and look at new and evolving trends each time we do this. So this update was largely technical, and we focused on refreshing the CTP project list, our outreach, and considering changing travel trends. So just to look back at our update schedule, we kicked off the plan update in July of 2024 and reviewed the CTP vision and goals and our update schedule with you in September of that same year. We reported out on major outreach themes and provided a report card or progress report that really looked at metrics and looked at how we've been doing since our last CTP in December of 2024. We updated the CTP list of projects in 2025. So we spent a lot of time on that with your staff to update all of those projects in the plan and brought draft and final projects to you in the spring and summer of 25. And then Ross reported out on our public engagement at the end of last year. So that brings us up to this point with the draft plan compiled and out for public comment. So these are the things we focused on as part of this plan update. We refreshed our public outreach. We evaluated progress we're making in reaching our goals as part of that report card. We updated our performance analysis for the CTP. We updated the plan reference sections and the CTP project list. And one thing we'll be doing later this year is looking at short-term implementation. So the scope of the plan goes out to 2050, but we'd like to look at what we can do in the next 5 to 10 years. So we'll be doing that later this year. So moving on to the vision and goals of the plan. So the plan vision really looks at connections between people and places and where they want to go. So everyone wants to go somewhere. They need to go to work, take kids to school, visit friends. So that's very important, a key piece of our vision. And we want to do that while we transition our transportation system to zero emissions by 2050. So there are 3 guiding principles we've identified to help us get there along the way, including safety, equity, and quality of life. So moving on to the goals, which provide a path to get to that vision, but also provide a way to measure progress. We've identified 4 goals over the course of the plan, and it's really focused on making our transportation system, number 1, connected and reliable. So really emphasizing the connections between people and where they want to go, but making sure the transportation system is also seamless, affordable, and dependable. Second, very important that it's safe and well maintained. We have a huge asset in our transportation system. Want to make sure that that continues to be an asset for us in the future and that people can use it safely. Third, very important that our transportation system is community oriented and place based. So we have a variety of different types of residents and communities in the county, including urban, suburban, and rural areas. So want to make sure that we're providing transportation options for all of those communities. And then finally, we're working towards a zero emissions transportation system in the future. So moving on to what is in the plan, there are 7 major chapters in the plan and a number of appendices. So I'll be walking through a brief description for most of these in the next few slides. So starting with outreach, our outreach really builds on past CTP work, surveys, and outreach conducted as part of other planning and outreach efforts that have been happening in the last little while. So I think a lot of us have been hearing a lot about outreach or survey fatigue, and we're out in the community talking to people about our projects and transportation priorities. We often hear that people have told us what they think already, right? So we want to make sure that we're incorporating that feedback that people have already given, that people are feeling heard, and that we're being efficient and effective with our outreach. So in order to do that, we've taken a 3-part approach to outreach for this plan. Ross reported out a little bit on this in December, but there were 3 different tracks. So the first of which was really digging into those current and recent planning documents and identifying major themes that keep coming up in those. So you can see a list of those in the word cloud on the slide here down at the bottom. And we heard things like safety, maintenance, cost and time, transit, biking, and walking were all very important in these documents. So we also looked at past CDPs and a number of surveys we conducted for Measure M and Go Sonoma. You can see a list of the top issues with our transportation system also there on the slide, and heard many similar things through those efforts, including cost of time of transportation is important, right? The environment, maintenance, and safety. So all major issues. So we took these major themes, we made them the focus of our in-person outreach in the field. We held a number of workshops. We held tabling and pop-up events out in the community and conducted an online survey. And we're out in each of your communities at least once over the course of the plan. So you can see a couple pictures of us out there. One is on Bike to Work Day on the Prince Memorial Greenway, and another is a workshop at Sonoma State University. So here's a summary of what we heard as part of that. So up top is a summary of what we heard as part of that new outreach that we conducted over the last year or so. And the bottom portion of the slide shows the high-level themes that we saw across all 3 of these tracks. So new outreach, Ross reported on it, but just to summarize some of that, we heard a lot of support for public transit and active transportation, a real focus on the need to improve safety. So we heard that over and over again every time we're in each of your communities. There's a need to improve transit reliability and access to stations. So really focusing on that last mile to transit stops. We heard a lot of support for electric vehicles, but people want better charging options and want it to be more affordable. So incentives were mentioned quite often in that regard. We heard a lot of interest about e-bikes and shared mobility. We heard a variety of different opinions and approaches that people would like to see taken about that, but definitely something we need to continue to explore. We need to continue to make travel options and accessibility more equitable across the board. And we heard a lot about congestion, particularly in rural areas. It's still a major issue across the county, particularly in certain spots and certain times of the day. So considering that new outreach and what we've gathered from these other recent documents, the top 5 common themes where people want to be able to get around more efficiently and quicker or faster. They support clean transportation options. Travel should be safe and cost less, and we need to maintain the valuable infrastructure that we have. So the next chapter really digs into current travel trends and demographics. It includes information on how we're going to grow into the future, how our transportation behavior and travel flows could change as well. And it pulls heavily from our travel behavior study, census and other demographic and data sources, and also Plan Bay Area, so the Regional Transportation Plan. So there's a lot of detail in the chapter. I've pulled a few highlights on this slide. I'll go through them really briefly, but just the high points is we're still seeing that most trips in Sonoma County stay in the county. Most travel is still focused on vehicles. We expect our population to continue to age, and population and employment growth will likely be pretty moderate into the future. So you can read more about that in the chapter, but you can see a graph here showing projected population on the housing and job side from Plan Bay Area on the slide. So the next section really provides a wealth of information on the Sonoma County transportation system, which is multimodal and includes buses, roads, active transportation, and emerging transportation technologies. So these components make up our transportation system and shape how people get around in the community. So it's a really robust chapter, including a lot of information on current transportation, but also explores emerging technologies and how they could change things going forward. Okay, so moving on to the CTP project list. So the CTP project list includes over 300 distinct projects, all of which are described in a good amount of detail in the appendix. So I would say that the project list is financially unconstrained and represents a vision list of transportation needs and priorities. So we'll get to the actual need, but we don't have all the funds for it at the moment. We worked closely with your staff and transit providers to update the list last year. The estimated project cost for the total project list is just over $7 billion, with just under $5 billion of that identified currently. So I put the 5 largest projects money-wise up on the slide here, with a couple Highway 37 projects, 2 SMART projects, and maintenance for the largest road system in the county, unincorporated Sonoma County. So here's a more detailed look at the project list, where you can see a breakdown by different project types. So you can see there's quite a variety and diversity in project types across different travel modes. And again, there's a lot of detail in the appendix. And we also have an online searchable version that you can filter and sort by community and different project types as well. So encourage you, if you're interested, to take a look at that electronic version. Oh, there we go. So the next section covers our performance assessment, where we use our travel model and other analysis tools to really look at how CTP projects, programs, and policies can help us achieve the CTP goals and vision, and how transportation may change in the county over time based on forecasted growth in the county. So a lot of information in the plan, but here are some of the highlights. So the first is the plan includes a significant increase in transit service. We'd be looking at about a 38% in transit service by 2050 if we implemented all of the transit projects in the plan. And that'd pay off with a pretty big increase in transit ridership, going up to a 65% increase by 2050. So a big win there on the transit side. The plan also greatly expands the countywide active transportation network, both at the regional scale and improving regional connections, but building out local networks and filling gaps in sidewalk and bikeway networks. And those projects are particularly focused on separated facilities that would improve safety and reduce conflicts between autos and walkers and bikers. Looking to vehicle miles traveled and greenhouse gas emissions per capita, we're expecting that to trend down, but we're still pretty far away from our zero emissions by 2050 goal. Looking to pavement condition and maintenance, we're seeing that trend up. So there's been a lot of investment in improving our transportation system and roadways. So in order for that to continue, we need to continue those investments. Moving on to safety, collisions are trending down. That could increase in the future due to increased congestion and growth. So in order to continue the positive downward trend, we need to continue focusing on Vision Zero policies, speed reductions, and corridor speed improvements. And then finally, looking at congestion, with all the CTP projects and policies in place, we're expecting moderate congestion increase, about 15%. So staying roughly the same as we are today. But without the CTP, that would increase by 65%. So a bigger jump. Okay, so moving on to recommendations for implementation. We face a number of opportunities and challenges as we work to improve transportation in the county. So starting with opportunities, we've identified that 60% of trips are under 5 miles. So there are a lot of opportunities to shift those to walking, biking, and transit. Almost 90% of our trips stay in the county, so we're largely self-sufficient. So we're doing a pretty good job there. There's a focus on city center growth in the county. So most of our forecasted growth is expected to occur within urban growth boundaries and priority development areas, which are easier to serve using active transportation and transit. And then looking at working from home, while we're not seeing a big decrease in vehicle miles traveled and total travel, we're seeing travel shift to less congested times of the day. So there's some congestion benefits and quality of life benefits associated with that. And then there are a number of emerging technologies that could help us meet our goals and make progress in the future if we do those mindfully and thoughtfully. So looking at challenges, the land use pattern in Sonoma County is pretty mature and often difficult to navigate without a car. So that's something we're up against. Travel in the county is still focused on single occupant vehicles. Emergency events like flooding and wildfire are difficult to predict and plan for. They impact travel patterns and damage infrastructure, and we have limited funding. So a lot of great things in the plan, but we don't have the money for it at this time. So considering these challenges and opportunities, the results of engagement, and our performance assessment, here's a high-level list of recommendations for implementing the plan. One is to get additional funding and resources to implement those great projects in the plan. We need to continue to focus on equity and improve transportation affordability and prioritize equitable access. We need to continue to emphasize city center growth. We have a great strategic travel demand management plan that'll help us implement trip reduction strategies once we start digging into that. We can work to shift short trips from automobiles to transit and other modes. We can continue to make our existing system more efficient and make sure it's well maintained. Lots of opportunities to improve our average fuel economy, either through electrification, hybrids, or using or shifting to more efficient vehicles or modes. We can shift freight to rail where appropriate. Again, we can thoughtfully implement transportation technologies like automation, freight delivery improvements, remote work, things like that. And then finally, we really want to look at the near term, so what we can do in the next 5 to 10 years. Okay, so moving on to next steps, we'll be gathering public comments on the draft through March 23rd, and then using these comments to revise the draft CTP into a final CTP. We're hoping to bring that back to you in May, depending on the number of comments we're receiving. We'll also be developing the short-term implementation plan this summer and fall, incorporating priority projects from the SCTCA funding program cycle 2, which will again focus on what we can do in the next 5 to 10 years. And then finally, we update the plan every 4 to 5 years. So we'll be kicking off the next CTP update 2028 around then. And as part of the next update, we'd recommend revisiting the plan vision and goals to make sure they're still current with your priorities. So with that, the full draft plan and searchable project list are available online at this link. It's also in the staff report. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and appreciate the presentation. It feels like we were doing this 5 years ago, and within the blink of an eye, we're back at it again. So appreciate the presentation. I'll open it up for questions or comments from my fellow board members at this time, and then we'll go to public comment. Go ahead, Director Harvey.
I don't know if this is the place to bring this up, but we've been getting a lot of concerns from folks regarding e-bikes and e-scooters. It's becoming not very safe on sidewalks and things like that. So you mentioned some short-term things and we were thinking, is it possible to engage the bike coalition, maybe a hearing session or some safety programs or something like that? Because it seems like people are running amok with some of those. And it really, we had an elderly woman get knocked over the other day by some kids on an e-bike that probably shouldn't have even been riding it. But so anyways, I don't know where that fits in, but it seemed like it's part of this safety feature.
And through the chair, I would say we heard the same thing over and over again, a lot of concerns about the good things about e-bikes, but also, dangerous use and things like that. So I think that would be completely appropriate to take a look at as part of that short-term implementation. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Hopkins?
Thank you. And my question was actually similar, which was actually about traffic calming for vehicles. And I was just wondering, do we have sort of best practices that could be shared with all of our jurisdictions? Because that's something that I hear a lot about, especially on rural roads, is just how do you actually get traffic to slow down a bit? We have, I think, a pretty clunky, outdated speed hump policy at the county. And I'm just wondering if there are kind of best practices. Feels like it fits in with that Vision Zero safety mode shift conversation, but just trying to get cars to, slow down a bit and actually go the speed limit.
Yeah, through the chair, we can definitely look into the resources and provide those as links and resources in the plan.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Director Cater Thompson, did you have a question? Okay, Dr. Lowe?
Authority or within Sonoma County traveling. How does that compare to people on Highway 37, for example?
So we have looked at Highway 37 in the past. I don't have the exact statistic at my fingertips right now, but the majority of people using Highway 37 are passing through. There is some component of that are Sonoma County residents, but we can definitely look at that information and get that to you and highlight it in the plan.
It seems to me.
I think you have to hold the button down for a few seconds until it turns green. Sorry, mine wasn't working last meeting either.
It just seems to me that finding out where it's working now, I think, where people live that are using Highway 37 would be critical to planning. I mean, I think this is in relationship to housing for sure, and people and where employment is and where people can afford to live. But I think it would be important to kind of look at that separately, because that's just such a, it's the most expensive thing on the plate and should be. But I think unless we really get a sense of where people are coming from, we're not going to be able to really deal with it and provide any kind of alternatives. So anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Did you want to respond to that? I know Director Rabbit has something to say as well.
Yeah, I would just briefly say there are a lot of resources associated with that in the Highway 37 corridor. So we'll make sure to compile those and reference them in the plan as well. Yeah.
Director Rabbit?
Add that there's an extensive origin and destination survey that was conducted. It may be a little bit out of date, but it was within the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of information regarding that.
Dr. Harvey?
I just would like to piggyback on Supervisor Hopkins' concern. We have a lot of areas where rural meets urban. And what we're finding is things like in the county, the speed limit will be 35. And then all of a sudden we hit residential and it's 25. And we get a lot of constituents that are complaining. And when you go drive, you can see what the problem is. They still think that they're, in an area. So I think those best practices would help, and maybe more coordination between the cities and the county to kind of, when we're getting into more urban areas, that we address those speed limits.
Thank you. Any other comments before we go to public comment? Oh, Director Gator Thompson.
Everything that I've heard, I'm hearing in my own city, and it seems like we're all going in the same direction. It would be great to do some coordination, whether it's looking at municipal codes for the e-bikes, the traffic calming and the ones that have really worked. But this is more in the city, but I understand the integration between the county and the cities. And, we're dealing with reducing speeds, and there's a way of, by 5 miles in certain areas. And so I think it's kind of a universal problem that would be great to have more of a workshop and conversation on.
Great. Thank you and Director Abbott.
I will just say, this is something we're working on, for instance, the highway, the old Redwood Highway corridor. The rules for speed limits are dramatically different for unincorporated versus incorporated cities and counties. And we've been trying to lower the speed limit. It has to do with residential density. It has to do with, commercial establishments and the density of that. Certainly the 85th percentile. What was the SB 43 some years back?
SB 43.
It did not give the tools that people thought it was going to give in order to reduce speed limits. And the only other thing I would add too is I'm all for looking at best practices. I'm not sure if they exist. Because I've been around long enough to see the cycle. The Golden Gate Bridge has very narrow lanes. Narrow lanes slow traffic. It also means that there are incredible amount of side swipes and accidents that occur. We have the same thing on Old Redwood where we're, trying to do different things. Sometimes you're making it unsafe rather than slower. So there's a fine line in there to make sure we, do the research properly to get whatever it is that we're installing to work.
Thank you. And just want to echo those comments. I think what we have here, and I think some of the benefit of having the county and all the cities represented in this room is that we know we have a lot of similarities, a lot of similar challenges. We also know that we have some experts on our team that could probably advance some of these policy solutions, and we can use this as an avenue to do it and share those resources. So thank you. And yes, go ahead, Vice Chair Coursey.
Just along that same line, and going back to e-bikes, I think that there's an educational component that is necessary to this, and also a data component. First of all, e-bikes are not all the same. They're very different classes of e-bikes, and a lot of what we see on the streets now that is surfacing as problematic are more e-scooters or e-motos. But in Marin, their first problem that they needed to overcome was data. And if your police departments or our sheriff's department, if our coroner isn't keeping data on accidents involving any type of e-bike, we should all encourage our local departments to do that in order to make any case that we want to make down the road.
Thank you. And a sobering point, but an important one at that. We know the dangers associated, especially when people aren't wearing helmets. And I think the more we can collect that data, the better off we'll be when trying to do some of these policy solutions down the road. So thank you. Okay, so with that, we'll go to public comment. We'll start with anyone in the room wishing to make public comment, and then we'll head over to Zoom. Please approach the podium. Seeing none, we'll head over to Zoom. Please use the raise hand feature. Anyone wishing to make public comment on Zoom? Seeing none, we'll go. Oh, one hand just went up. Eris Weaver from the Bicycle Coalition. Go ahead, Eris.
Hi, I'm sorry, I came in late. What agenda item are you on?
Comprehensive Transportation Plan.
Okay, then I will put my hand back down.
Sorry, perfect. Item 5.1 to be clear. And I don't see any other hands raised, so we will go ahead and close public comment. And any final comments on this before we move on? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Item 5.2, which is our MTC ABAG Transit-Oriented Communities or TOC policy report. And Chris Barney again.
Yeah, I'll give a quick intro for Dave Otten, Director of Planning with Bay Area Metro. He's going to provide an update on the TOC policy or Transit-Oriented Communities policy today. So just a really brief background on what it is. It's intended to implement Plan Bay Area 2050 plus strategies that really focus on increasing housing and commercial densities and encourage a diverse mix of housing types in areas served by fixed use transit service. So in Sonoma County, that applies to the half-mile area around SMART station areas in Sonoma County. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission considered how the TOC policy will be implemented through the One Bay Area 4 grant program at the end of February at their commission meeting. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Dave Vaughton for the report.
Good afternoon. As Chris mentioned, I'm Dave Vaughton. I'm the planning director with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission and the Association for Bay Area Governments. And I'm happy to be here to share an overview of MTC's Transit-Oriented Communities Incentive Program. Go to the next slide here. There we go. So my presentation today will do two things. First, I'll provide a background on MTC's Transit-Oriented Communities Policy adopted in 2022. And then I'll provide an overview of the new incentive program that was adopted by the Commission in February. We'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the program, the evaluation framework, including adjustments made for the One Bay Area Grant Cycle 4 cycle, and the eligibility criteria, funding awards, and uses. So really starting with the big picture, why do we have a TOC policy in the Bay Area? Well, it's because we know that land use plays a critical role in the success of our transit systems. We have more people and jobs located near high-quality transit. We can achieve ridership growth and connect more communities. And that's why it's important that density, housing affordability, parking, and multimodal access policies near stations are thoughtfully crafted and aligned with the success of our region's transit operators. So in September 2022, the Commission adopted the TOC policy as a means to better link transit investments throughout the Bay Area with land use planning and local decision-making, encouraging land use and mobility patterns that better support transit ridership growth. It built upon an existing policy, the 2005 Transit-Oriented Development Policy, or TOD policy. The 2022 TOC policy seeks to ensure that areas around transit stations and corridors are well-connected neighborhoods with a mix of housing, offices, and retail that support transportation and housing options. It applies, as Chris mentioned, within a half-mile of rail stations, ferry terminals, and BRT stops. And in Sonoma County specifically, it applies to the SMART station areas. MTC ABAG staff and the Commission worked hard to craft the policy and align it with the goals of Plan Bay Area while being flexible enough to recognize the diversity of communities within our 9-county region. There are 4 key components to the policy: density, including setting of minimum and maximum levels for future residential and office development; housing, adoption of policies to support what we call the 3 Ps of housing: production, preservation, and protection, as well as commercial stabilization; parking, aligning parking policies with transit access and multimodal priorities; and station access, ensuring safe, convenient ways for people to reach transit stations. In 2025 and 2026, we've been working on an incentive program to link the policy to real-world implementation. When the policy was adopted in 2022, MTC committed to consider prioritizing investments in areas subject to and consistent with the TOC policy in future One Bay Area grant cycles, starting in 2026 with Cycle 4. Over the past year, our staff have worked closely with our commissioners, county transportation agencies, local jurisdictions, and other stakeholders to consider how to best factor jurisdiction progress on the TOC policy into OBAG Cycle 4. And on January 28th, the Commission approved the OBAG Cycle 4 funding framework. It included a $45 million allocation to the TOC incentive program. With the exception of the TOC incentive program, there are no requirements for TOC consistency for any other OBAG 4 program, either on the regional or county side. The OBAG Cycle 4 framework also included $5 million as a North Bay set-aside that would be distributed through the county program, recognizing the unique transportation needs of rural communities with fewer or no TOC areas. Jumping back to the $45 million incentive program, it really has 4 goals. To advance our regional climate, housing, and equity goals by focusing growth near transit, incentivizing adoption of TOC consistent policies that support housing and transit ridership, aligning regional discretionary regional transportation funding with local commitments, and targeting local limited funds to jurisdictions that are delivering meaningful TOC outcomes. So how did TOC shift from a policy to an incentive program? As mentioned, the policy was adopted in 2022 by the Commission, and our staff had over 300 meetings with stakeholders throughout the Bay Area, mostly with local jurisdiction staff. Early on, these meetings focused on gathering input on the administrative guidance, but we've also provided technical assistance, including grant funds, to assist jurisdictions in meeting TOC standards. What we learned from these conversations was really informed the evaluation framework and the approach for linking local progress on TOC consistency to OBAG funding. One key theme that emerged in those conversations was the desire for a fully incentive-based program that rewards completed policies while preserving jurisdictions' access to all other OBAG funds. In spring 2025, we shared a draft TOC evaluation framework to assess jurisdictions' progress for meeting the TOC policy standards. It's designed to be transparent and consistent, allowing jurisdictions to track their progress over time. The evaluation framework takes those 4 components of the original policy, density, housing, parking, and station access, and allocates an equal 25 points for each, for a total possible score of 100. Each of the 4 components includes multiple standards with specific weights and point values within that framework. In fall 2025, we integrated some refinements to the initial draft framework, really to be responsive to what we heard from jurisdictions, provide greater clarity and flexibility. Some examples of this include decreasing the points for office intensity given post-pandemic realities, allowing a wider variety of funding sources to fulfill housing policy requirements, decreasing points for vehicle parking maximums given market challenges, and increasing points for things like shared and unbundled parking policies and access gap analyses and the broader set of transportation modes. The Commission also adopted several adjustments to the evaluation framework that apply for OBAG 4. First, we've given an extension of 18 months to July 1st, 2027 for jurisdictions to submit materials demonstrating consistency with the policy, which would then make them eligible for an incentive payment. Second, given this extension and the fully incentive-based approach for the program, we are not proposing any credit for work in progress as of that time. Third, TOCs that are subject to SB 79 will receive full credit for the TOC maximum allowable density standard. Of course, SB 79 only applies in 4 of the Bay Area counties. Lastly, jurisdictions can receive credit for 1 housing protection policy based on participation in an eligible countywide program. For reference, the TOC policy calls for jurisdictions to adopt 2 housing protection policies from a menu totaling 11 different options. This is important because we want to make sure that existing residents benefit from transit-oriented growth and are not displaced to less transit-accessible areas, which could increase greenhouse gas emissions. Protection policies are worth up to 8 of the 100 total points, and we want to underscore that none of the policy options in that menu is given preference over one another. They are all assessed equally. This modification of allowing credit for participating in a countywide housing production program gives jurisdictions additional flexibility. So who qualifies for the TOC incentive program? Jurisdictions must achieve a score of 85 out of the total 100 points to be eligible. A clear, relatively high threshold aligns with the fully incentive-based approach for the program and rewards meaningful progress towards TOC, and Plan Bay Area 2050 plus goals. As a reminder, jurisdictions that have a score lower than 85, as well as non-TOC jurisdictions, remain eligible for all other OBAG county and regional funds. Our team estimates that there are roughly 10 to 15 jurisdictions of varying sizes distributed throughout the region that are on track to receive money at this threshold. For those jurisdictions that do have a score of 85 or above as of July 2027, they would be awarded an incentive payment that would be very flexible, eligible for any use under the existing OBAG 4 county program. This could include planning or capital projects for local roads, transit, or active transportation. The program funds would be distributed through a performance-based program for those qualifying jurisdictions. For formula factors, jurisdictions with more TOCs and larger populations would be eligible for larger awards, reflecting the increased effort, expense, and impact to achieve progress at that scale. There would also be a minimum amount by size tier to make sure we have a meaningful incentive for all jurisdictions, and maximum awards by size tier to make sure those benefits are distributed broadly. As you can see here, the grants are really scaled based on size, and for reference, several jurisdictions in Sonoma County would fall in that medium-sized tier, including Santa Rosa, the county itself, Petaluma, and Roanoke Park, as well as there are several TOC jurisdictions that fall in the small category, including Cotati, Windsor, Healdsburg, and Cloverdale. The Commission could refine the approach in late 2027 if the scores differ considerably from our current estimates. But right now, the threshold of 85, we do anticipate that we'll have a good number of jurisdictions that fall within that threshold. So in terms of some next steps, later this spring, our team will be returning to the Metropolitan Transportation Commissions with amendments to the TOC policy to do two things. One, we'd like to provide greater flexibility to transit extension projects seeking non-OBAG discretionary funding. And two, we'd like to clarify that the Commission will further consider the evolving role of the TOC policy at the start of the next OBAG cycle, Cycle 5. We'll also be revising the administrative guidance used to advance the policy and its incentive program to align with the Commission action earlier this winter. Over the next year, we will be providing ongoing technical assistance to jurisdictions, including many jurisdictions that have received TOC grants, in order to maximize the number of jurisdictions that are ready to qualify by the July 1st deadline. Following that submission deadline, here are some of the other key milestones to be aware of. Jurisdictions that do submit and it's confirmed that their score is 85 or above would be notified by fall 2027. And in winter 2027, the Commission would fund awards to qualifying jurisdictions, working closely with those jurisdictions to identify the project or projects for which they want to assign those monies toward. In spring 2028, the Commission would then program funds to the projects. We will also continue working with jurisdictions to provide technical assistance beyond the 2027 deadline, both through future rounds of TOC grants and other direct technical assistance to support further progress in advance of future OBAG cycles. With that, I'm happy to take any questions on the TOC incentive program. Thank you.
Okay, well, seeing no questions, it was very straight. I'm just kidding. I've got questions. Just teasing. Vice Chair Corsi, take it away.
I have a very basic question here. At various times in the presentation, I was thinking this was to incentivize housing and to incentivize infrastructure. Is it one or both or any?
Yeah. So these One Bay Area grant funds are transportation monies. They are funded, the incentive monies would need to fund transportation projects designed to support transit-oriented growth. But they're designed as an incentive to advance policies related to zoning and housing and all the things I talked about. So the incentives would be helping to fund projects in your communities.
Thank you.
Director Okrepke.
Thank you. A clarifying question. So when it says, sorry, I'm trying to find the slide. No work in progress credit. It's up or down, black and white. Is that correct?
Well, there's a little more nuance to it. What I would say is in terms of work in progress, the commission action did not include credit for work in progress because an 18-month extension was provided. So we're providing 18 more months to complete a policy to get those things across the finish line instead of looking at where, work in progress today. The flexibility in the policy comes from the partial credit. So what I didn't talk about today is if a jurisdiction has implemented a policy, but maybe it falls short of TRC standards, they still get partial points for that policy. So there's a lot of ways that the policy has built in flexibility, both in terms of jurisdiction context, jurisdiction size, and whether there's a policy on the books, but maybe it doesn't get to 100%. All those things you get credit in the framework. It's the work and credit aspect was really something that was floated when we were looking at implementing the policy on its original time frame. It would have gone into effect in January 2026. So we're thinking about work in progress from that angle, but with the extension, it didn't seem appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when it says ongoing technical assistance, I mean, presumably that's administrative and not financial, correct?
There's actually direct grant funding that's been provided to jurisdictions to implement policies. So we had a round of grants in 2025 that were awarded out. Jurisdictions came in with requests to fund specific, zoning changes or parking policy changes. So we've awarded out all those grants at this time. We are likely to do another round of grants several years from now in advance of the next cycle of OBAG. But yeah, we're providing both, partnership type direct assistance, but we're also providing grants to jurisdictions so they have consultant resources to do the work.
I would highly recommend doing another round just because being from Santa Rosa, we do have the infrastructure. It won't be easy, but it's doable with the infrastructure we have. But I think for smaller jurisdictions, being able to get all of this done is going to be costly just to get to a point where they qualify for the incentives.
Thank you. And go ahead, Director Harvey.
To add on to that, we moved a lot of things around and completed this on time, only to have the goal posts moved out 18 months. So for our community, that's really significant because we had to put off some other priorities to do that. So my question surrounds, so how many communities met the original deadline? And is that why the goalposts were moved? Was because not enough people or communities had met that?
So for I'm happy to, you can, if you'd like to add, I can start. What I would say is, obviously there was a lot of debate at the commission over the past year about the program. We did not require jurisdictions to submit their scores to us. We have some preliminary data, so we don't actually know the full answer to your question, but you're right that many jurisdictions were not on track to hit the January 2026 deadline, and needed more time. We also know that we awarded some grants to jurisdictions to do that work, and those grants needed more time to reach completion. They were awarded in 2025, and many of them take a year or two to complete. So this gives people time to leverage those monies. Maybe for the political side, I'll turn to Commissioner Fleming.
Thank you, Dave. This was something that was not an easy decision to reach, and the experience of the cities of Sonoma County and North Bay in particular were really helpful in moving the debate around this and even getting the stricter implementation in the timeline that we have. But I will say that Cotati was an outlier in being the only smaller jurisdiction in the entire Bay Area that had their things together on time and advocated for this. And I was able to use that to try to hold the line, but it was a compromise in the end, and one that I'm not super happy about as far as extending the timeline. It makes it less advantageous both for Cotati and Santa Rosa, and was an example of a compromise.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So it does, make it difficult because as you're saying, you're continuing to change, which also then means we thought we were completed with what the guidelines were that were laid out, but it sounds like those guidelines and what needs to be done could continue to change in the next 18 months. And again, for a small city, that's really, really difficult to deal with changing goalposts. It almost makes it, like, why bother? And especially on your one slide, it sounds like in an area, there's only going to be one small community that gets funded on that slide. Is that
No,
the way that?
if I may clarify, so on any small jurisdiction that achieves a score of 85 or above would be eligible for a grant. So it is not just one per category, anything like that. That's giving people a sense of the magnitude. So every small jurisdiction that has a score of 85 or above will get a grant between $1 and $2 million.
Okay, so because that slide sounds like here's at the different levels, how many will be.
Apologies if that was unclear, but that's what that's saying. And to your earlier point, I do want to just clarify that yes, some changes have been made to the framework. They were generally providing more flexibility, making it easier to get to 85. So certainly we encourage jurisdictions to take a look at where the commission landed. We'll be putting out the admin guidance to clarify, but in general, it shouldn't have been increasing the standards by any means. It was giving people more flexibility to get to that goal.
And I would hope that if you change things, that you will give communities a little bit more lead time.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, if we'd have known that a lot of communities were not going to make it and that there was a likelihood that you were going to move the deadline, we could have done some other things and then kind of gone along and had more time to do it. So if you're going to make any more changes like that, the earlier you notify folks, I think the easier it is for them to plan accordingly.
Understood. I think at this time, the program was approved by the commission, so we don't have any plans to change the incentive program at this time. As I mentioned, the only caveat to that, which was shown in the presentation, is if the number of jurisdictions that hit 85 or above is radically different from the 10 to 15 we expect, then the commission could choose to reevaluate it. But I think the intention at this time is that the framework is set for this incentive program going into next year.
Thank you.
Dr. Hopkins?
And maybe this question is actually more for my colleagues, or maybe you would know, just having sort of the Bay Area wide perspective. So are most jurisdictions just having a specific TOC policy that only applies to those areas, or are they sort of looking at a policy that actually would apply throughout their jurisdiction? Because I know that you only require the one, right? It only has to apply in this area, but are folks calling that out separately, or are they just going for the whole shebang?
So some aspects of the TOC policy, like density, right, are very much specific to the half-mile circle around the transit station. But some of the others, like housing policies, are usually adopted at the jurisdiction-wide scale. So we, the minimum that's established in the TOC policy, that you need to have the housing policy for that TOC. But in many cases, jurisdictions are choosing to implement those policies citywide. Is it both from an administrative perspective, it's easier, as well as they want to make sure those benefits are felt by the broader community. So it does depend on which aspect of TOC that they're focused on. As I said, for those housing policies in general, most people are adopting them jurisdiction-wide.
Okay, and I guess I'm thinking from a county perspective, which is very different, right? Because we have a very rural county, so what would work in Guerneville may not work right around a smart station and unincorporated, more urban area. So they do or don't have to be jurisdiction-wide.
They don't have to be jurisdiction-wide. They have to apply at minimum in the TOC area.
Okay, great. And then just to clarify, the funding that then opens up is really for those areas. It's not for potentially other areas in the jurisdiction, or it's all funding?
So the incentive funding, as I understand it, it doesn't have to necessarily be spent in the TOC. We would, I think there's an argument for that being logical in terms of making sure that the projects are helping to fund infrastructure that supports it. But we have set up the program in a way where it's going to be rather flexible you saw the list of typologies of projects that a jurisdiction fund. We really want it to be a meaningful incentive and carrot. So we've maximized the flexibility.
Great. And just to share, one of the challenges that we have is that we have a lot of, residents who don't have direct access to smart stations. So thinking about how do you sort of get folks right into that transit corridor is important because we just don't have that access to the east or west or north right now in Sonoma County. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? I have one. So one of the things I saw when you were looking at the map and it identifies whether or not the jurisdictions are within a corridor, and none of ours are apply towards a corridor. And I'm curious, is that because we aren't considered a line, even though the smart line is a line in our minds?
Yeah, so the corridor provision in TOC is really focused on rail and bus corridors where the stations are much closer together. So not to get too into the weeds, but in places like San Jose and San Francisco, the light rail stations are close enough together that planning each one of those as their own individual TOC just simply didn't make sense. And so we've allowed those jurisdictions to plan for, say, their light rail network as a part of a suite of corridors because the circles all overlap one another and create almost a continuous TOC polygon. Generally for all of our regional rail networks, including SMART, we're looking at the TOCs individually because there's a mile or 2 miles or sometimes even 5 miles or more between stations. And so they're more individual discrete station areas.
Okay. And then I saw on your slides one when you talk about the changes that were made, and specifically there was some around parking minimums and maximums. And then the other one said around station areas to increase points for access gap analysis to equally consider pedestrian, bike, and bus.
Yeah.
What does the access gap analysis mean in this context?
Yeah, so the access gap analysis is, there's some flexibility in terms of what sort of transportation study you can do to fulfill it. But basically, it's looking at how do you get to the station by all modes of transportation. And so in the earlier versions of the framework, it was not as flexible in terms of the different modes. And so now the way that it's been structured in the final version is if you have done, say, a active transportation analysis that looks at access for bike and pedestrian modes, you would get partial credit. And if you've also included access by local bus for connectivity, say to a rail station, you get full credit. So it's basically just acknowledging that if you've done a plan that's specific to one mode or 2 modes, you can get partial credit. If you've looked at all 3 modes, that's how you get full credit.
Okay. Thank you. And then can you talk a little bit about the parking minimum and maximum changes that were brought forward? Because I think for some jurisdictions that took early action, that will play, some people had to work really hard to get those parking maximums in there, and now that's a change.
Yeah, we did get a lot of feedback on that particular aspect of the TOC framework. The main change that we made is parking maximums continue to be part of the framework. I really want to underscore that. But the number of points assigned to them was reduced, and those points were reallocated to some of the other things shown on that slide. So in the original framework, parking maximums would have received, I think, the most, they were one of the largest point assignments in the whole framework. Again, they're still in there, but that's been reduced, recognizing how hard it is for some jurisdictions to commit to advancing those particular policies. So that's the main change.
Thank you. Director Harvey?
The other thing we had quite a lot of discussion around was the unbundled parking.
Mm-hmm.
So from what usually happens is things never go down, they always go up. So a lot of the discussion was around people are not going to reduce their rent if you unbundle the parking. What they are going to do is increase that amount to purchase a parking space. And a lot of folks felt that that was an equity issue, because then only people that were wealthy and that could afford an extra $200, $300, $400, $500 a month for a parking space, then folks that didn't have that amount of money would just be out a parking space and would have to walk, to get to where they were at. So we did have quite a lot of discussion, and a lot of folks were really concerned about that from an equity perspective, because having a roof over your head is important. And I've never seen an instance where people bring the rents down in order to give someone a credit for not taking a parking space. So.
Thank you. And then I'm curious when it comes to how, and maybe this is a question for Director Cameron, in terms of how we move forward and with which jurisdictions are, working hard to try to implement this and reach a certain score versus those that aren't eligible because they're not on the SMART corridor. How does this, obviously the incentive money would go just to the jurisdictions that hit that score, but then in terms of how we are able to compete for OBAG funds for the actual projects that we've done in the past where we go after OBAG money for some of the jurisdictions projects. How does that play out subsequent to this?
Sure. So just to give a overall OBAG framework, right? So there's the OBAG local programs. So those local programs are part of the funding that we're going to administer as part of the SCTCA call for project cycle 2, right? So we're going to come with recommendations this summer, and then all the jurisdictions are going to be eligible for those funds. They will advance, and everyone will get a piece of that, regardless of whether it's the actual OBAG fund, OBAG 2 local programs, or one of the other fund sources under that funding program. This $45 million pot is something that we're working with all your jurisdictions as well as MTC that are on the corridor. And I see.
Sorry, we're not allowed to call it a corridor anymore. We don't qualify. Just kidding. Our version of a corridor, but not MTC's version of a corridor.
I think so.
I'm mean, just teasing.
I know it's a great comment. And the bottom line is, multiple small jurisdictions, I think, are going to be successful in the $1 to $2 million pot, and multiple medium jurisdictions are going to be successful in that $2 to $4 million pot. So this is a OBAG regional program, not a local one, that we in Sonoma County, I believe, are going to be very successful in. And so we don't know the answer as to how many there are, but I can tell you that Noah from Katati is sitting in those same meetings with all the rest of your staff and his leadership, and then all of us coming together on this. I think we're going to do quite well.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other questions before we go to the public? Okay, we'll open it up for public comment. If there's anyone in the room, please feel free to approach the podium. And we'll head over to Zoom. Please use the raise hand feature if you'd like to make comment. Seeing no one in the room, we'll head over to Zoom. Anyone on Zoom wishing to make public comment, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and bring it back. And this is a report, so we're just receiving the report, no action. Any final comments before we move on to the next item? I'll just say thank you so much for the presentation, for coming to explain to us in 15 minutes what has seemingly taken quite a bit of time for you guys to create this policy. And we're really excited to see where the jurisdictions take it and what comes of it, and appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me today.
And thank you to our MTC representative, Victoria Fleming, for attending today and speaking on behalf. We appreciate your advocacy. No one's ever said it was fun, so no, but thank you so much for your advocacy and work on behalf of Sonoma County. We appreciate it. Okay, and we are going to be welcoming Chris Barney back up for item 5.3, which is the Renewal Enterprise District 2026 update.
Great, and good afternoon again. So we'd like to welcome Robin Stefani, the Executive Director for the Renewal Enterprise District, to join us today. So the Renewal Enterprise District, otherwise known as the RED, was created, which did create a joint powers authority with the founding partners of the City of Santa Rosa and County of Sonoma. So the RED's goal and purpose is to work across jurisdictions and industry to facilitate housing strategies aligned with regional goals for the economy, transportation, and the environment to ensure a resilient future. So happy to have Robin here with us today to provide an update on the RED.
Hi, how's everyone doing? Ready to switch gears a little bit? Great. Let me just make sure this is working. Okay, great. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me. So at the end of the day, what the RED is trying to do is aim to create housing with a complete community in mind. And so up on this slide, I have a rendering of what is the new city center in Casa Roseland. And this is a perfect example, and it epitomizes what we're trying to do with the red. So this takes a former parking lot that was in disrepair and turned it into a new city center with housing, economy, the ability for different types of transportation, a walkable, transit-rich community. And this kind of is the goal of the complete communities that we try to do with the red. How do we do that? So, I have this here, sorry. So much easier. So the red Renewal Enterprise District is a joint powers authority, and we created the Renewal Enterprise District Housing Fund, which we call the Red Housing Fund, and we have successfully launched that Red Housing Fund. And so it is its own independent 501c3 nonprofit, and the Joint Powers Authority has super powers that it can do, but the Red Housing Fund is entirely responsible for administering the loans that the Red Housing Fund has a $22 million loan program that it administers. And so what we're doing is we're kind of bookending the housing development cycle. And so the Red, as a joint powers authority, is working kind of on the front end of this and setting the table for development through different types of collaborative grants that I'm going to talk about in a second. And then the Red Housing Fund is kind of coming in at the end and providing the gap financing at the end. And I'll go into a little bit more about that in a second. Okay, so the Red, the JPA, establishes the Red project criteria, which establishes the eligibility of a project that would then go to the Red Fund for funding. And so in order to meet the project criteria, you have to meet all of these threshold criteria, and then at least one of the evaluation criteria. So the Red JPA has worked collaboratively to kind of set the table. And so the way that we do that is by bringing in some of those early infrastructure dollars. And this table just kind of shows the types of projects, types of funds that we've gone after, that we've worked collaboratively on, and the types of projects that they've helped to kind of spur to the next phase of development, make more competitive so that they can go after additional funding. And then also there's sustainable transit infrastructure, other transit-related amenities and programs that are sometimes rolled into these depending on what the grant is for. So that sets the table, and then the project is going to advance to its entitlements and advance to putting its capital stack together. And that may be different for affordable projects or market rate. And these are the projects that the Red Housing Fund has loaned to, and for a total of 632 new units in the first 6 housing projects here. And then they have 2 additional projects that are in the pipeline, and they have another NOFA coming out, which will be about 5 million. And we should be hearing about that any day. And then they'll have another NOFA in 2027, which is anticipated to be around 7 million. And I should note that the Red Housing Fund has a new executive director, Mark Krug, who many of you may know. And so if you have any specific questions about the fund or the NOFA that's coming out, you can contact me or you can contact Mark, and we'll be happy to connect you or staff up with that. So, really what we're trying to do is have housing as the heart of the work plan, but we're tying into these other policy goals of the community that have to do with transportation, economy, the environment, and social equity. And so this particular project right here, this is a little social and economic benefits report that was done through the Affordable Housing Benefits Map. And I wanted to highlight this because it's a project in Roseland, and it really kind of shows what, when you build housing of the right type, near jobs, near transportation, in a walkable community, the kind of benefits that get added to that are above and beyond the housing. And what was really kind of striking for me was that when I went to the opening for this particular housing project, there were quite a number of educators that were there. And I started to, talk to them about why they were there. And they said, oh, well, the developer had a contest at our school, that provided, that was basically a contest of naming rights to be able to name that particular development. So what we had been calling Acme through the development cycle became Del Corazon. And the student who wrote an essay and won the naming rights got up and she spoke. And there was probably 6 or 7 different various people from the school district, from the school, her family there. And she spoke about how this new development near her school, near the things that she did after school, the Boys and Girls Club, the supermarket, that kind of thing, was a new heart to the community. And it was great to see the educators showing up for this, because I think that it's really important that we are also thinking about how we're interfacing with other benefits in the community, the amenities in our community. So you've heard a lot about transportation and how to move people around. If we're building housing where people want to be and where they want to work and where they want to go to school, then we're really doing a lot to help to create that sense of community and that sense of place. In addition, the cost of transportation for walking in a walkable neighborhood is a lot less. And so, I know that we have limited resources and we're trying to stretch those resources. So the more that we can build housing where people can walk and bike and utilize the different types of non-vehicle transportation, the better are we going to be as a community. So for 2026, now that we've launched the Red Housing Fund and it's fully out and operational with the new executive director, we're looking at other opportunities. And the Red Housing Fund, the Renewal Enterprise District, was always created with the notion of being a regional housing JPA. And so right now we're updating the RED project criteria, which we had reviewed earlier, and we're aligning it with Plan Bay Area 2050 plus, the implementation, because we know that the funding is going to be water flowing down those through that mechanism. And so it makes sense that we are aligning our geographies to align with that. Additionally, we're outreaching to all of the jurisdictions to welcome them, to let them know what we're doing, welcome them to the JPA. And we have very exciting news that we have our first potential letter of interest from Katati to join the JPA. So we're really excited about that. And so what we are hoping to do is to leverage the resources that we're developing here with these emerging funding strategies to be able to help in additional ways beyond just the Red Housing Fund. So, but beyond collaborative grants and beyond the Red Housing Fund, what else can we do? So we're looking at new emerging funding strategies such as master leasing, essential function bonds, and 6320 bonds. And the guaranteed fund and the TIFIA TOD financing pilot program. So I can go into more detail about those, but don't want to get too into the weeds. And yeah, we can head into questions.
Great. We'll start with Director Lee.
That's amazing stuff. What's amazing to me about it is it's going right over my head how it is that that you are accomplishing this. So say, I'll tell you why I think that. So you gave this beautiful planned community with park and everything else in it. The way I understand it to work in real life, and especially in Windsor, is that the HCD controls how many
units you have to build and, well, let's just leave it at that, how many units you have to build and the rules you have to go by and everything like that. And if you don't follow their rules, they come in and hit you with a very large sledgehammer. And what are we missing, or what am I not understanding, that you have a magic wand whereby you can come in and say, I'd like to have a beautiful park here with so-and-so, as you demonstrated in that first slide?
Yeah.
Do you get my question?
I do, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So that particular development took 25 years to bring to fruition. And it is near and dear to many of our hearts that have been working in community development and housing. And for a long time, it took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and time to get to that point. What we're trying to do is accelerate that. So the way that we do that is a lot of times it's really about money, as we all know, and bringing money to set the table through the collaborative grant process, through these emerging funding strategies that we're talking about, so that we can make projects more competitive, because really what we're trying to do is incentivize the right development in the right place for the right people. And so by setting the table, by doing all that work and aligning our transportation and our economic development and our housing policies and our environmental goals, we can have a shared vision for the future, and we can start to head in that direction now, so that we are ready when a development is an opportunity for development presents itself.
So I think what I'm getting out of that is essentially you bring the finance in, the grants or whatever, so that a developer who normally would be pumping as much money as possible out of that development can afford to do something nicer and still make the same amount of money because you're making the ends meet.
That's right. Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Vice Chair Corsi.
Thank you. Director Leap, I serve on the RED board. I think I'm chair now. Is that right? It's just happened. But just to be clear, RED doesn't build anything, doesn't plan anything. What it does, as Robin says, is it can accelerate, incentivize, and enable projects that may just need that last little piece of the stack to get over the hump. The RED is rooted in the Sonoma Complex fires of 2017 and the aftermath of that, when a lot of us sat around a table and talked about how not just to spend the next 6 years or so rebuilding what was lost, the 6,000 homes and businesses and more that was lost in Sonoma County that October, but how to get 6 years down the road and have recovered and moved on. And so not just to rebuild, but to keep momentum building. As Robin pointed out, we've been able to help more than 600 units get built in Santa Rosa. And it's by loaning that last 7 million is our biggest loan.
That's right.
Probably.
Yep. But as small as 800.
Smallest is 800,000. Yeah. And sometimes those are the biggest barriers to getting those things built. It's the last thing. And they're just, this type of funding wasn't available until we made it available. And, SCTA was part of that. Suzanne Smith was at that table. Jeff Cyphers from Sonoma Clean Power, people from the county, people from the city of Santa Rosa, people from the private sector. Kaiser has been one of our key partners going through this. All of these units have been built in Santa Rosa so far. In Roseland, a couple projects. In downtown, the former Bennett Valley Senior Center was the recipient of RED funding, and we're looking to do more. I'm really happy to have Katati show an interest in this. Hope that other cities do too. Trying to figure out how we can make it an equitable situation. The money came primarily from the city of Santa Rosa and the county, $10 million each. That 10 million plus other from Kaiser and elsewhere is out in the community now. There's another $5 million that the Red Housing Fund will put out in a NOFA soon, or have they already done that?
Imminently, yes.
Imminent. So, this is something that's pretty unique to Sonoma County. It's proven itself to be valuable in creating the housing that we all talk about all the time. It's so needed around here. Robin, thank you for your presentation. And I hope all of you encourage your colleagues on your councils and staff to consider becoming partners with us.
Great, thank you. Director Kater Thompson.
I just want to comment, the Petaluma North Station, we're actually going to be expanding to do a specific plan. And there was the first meeting, and now there's going to be the community participation. And that's going to take probably a year and a half to complete. And so it's a large area, and it's right next to the rail station. So I'm looking forward to working with this, because I had to watch the funding for other projects and how you had to scramble at the last minute to make it happen. And so this is fantastic.
Thank you, Director Rabbit.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good to see you, Robin. And I think I was the first director or chair of the RED. It really came out of a conversation post fires, obviously, as my colleague said, but trying to follow the model that we found through MTC in trying to solve the Bay Area's housing crisis of having a New York City has a great housing foundation model that has literally billions of dollars. They actually bought properties back when the Bronx was burning and people were walking away from them smartly to reinvest them later and really reinvest those dollars in a big way. And the RED kind of originated through all those conversations post-fire to really find a place to jumpstart the projects that are out there that just can't get over the finish line. And just reflecting back, how different that is from many years ago, where every time a developer was trying to build something, they were, trying to rip off whomever they were. You pick your poison, but really it was a matter of just, it's so expensive to build something these days to really get it in the ground, but still so beneficial for so many people to have the home. So great job with 800 units and counting.
Anyone else before we go to public comment? Okay, we'll open it up to public comment for anyone here in the room. Please feel free to approach the podium. Not seeing anyone join us, we'll go to Zoom. Please use the raise hand feature. And not seeing anyone on Zoom, so we'll bring it back. I know that we do have a similar effort, well, different. We have a community trust that's being formed around housing in Healdsburg, and I told them, don't reinvent the wheel. Please go talk to the RED. So I love to hear that Katati is talking to you all and thinking about joining. And I think especially as we see these like regional housing alignment efforts as it relates to transit and transportation projects, my hope is that housing being the clear, third leg of that stool, that you all can play an important role. And it's my hope that it does go outside of Santa Rosa, and that we are going to see some increase in densities and some projects that maybe in years past, looking at densities in some of the smaller jurisdictions wouldn't have made sense, but now we're really seeing concentrated growth in some of these communities. So I look forward to hearing where this goes and if other jurisdictions can get involved, and how we make that work, given not many jurisdictions have the kind of seed money, and we don't want to have another catastrophic event that will yield future seed money. So figuring out how we can engage in those conversations will be interesting, but really exciting to hear that other cities are looking to get involved. Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, our favorite acronym is back. Mascots. Transit service changes are beginning in a month, which it's like finally here. This is very exciting. We've been talking about this for quite some time. So we'll invite Dana up to let us know where things are headed.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. So as you know, the major service changes from the mascots or the Marin Sonoma Coordinated Transit Service Plan will be taking place on April 12th. So although we are still a week or two away from sharing final schedules and materials, we wanted to take this opportunity to review the changes that are coming and make sure that they're understood and ask for your support in sharing the materials and the schedules when they do come out in the next couple weeks. So as a reminder, Mascots is a collaborative partnership to advance the cost effectiveness, ridership recovery, and growth along the Highway 101 corridor in the North Bay. It's focused on regional services and it's grounded in post-pandemic travel behavior and work patterns. The main goals for this project were to grow ridership, work as if the transit operators were one agency, and to develop a plan that is implementable. And that implementation is happening on April 12th. So the final service plan was adopted by the transit agencies that have the most major service changes, Smart, Golden Gate, and Marin Transit in late 2025. So for the Smart and Golden Gate Route 101 corridor, the major changes are that Golden Gate Transit Route 101 service is going to be redistributed from Sonoma County to Marin County where the demand is higher. And Route 101 between Novato and Santa Rosa is being replaced by increased Smart train service. So for Golden Gate Transit Route 101, the frequency will be increased between San Rafael and San Francisco, where that demand is really high, to all-day 30-minute service during the week, and peak periods will be 15-minute frequencies. The service will be truncated in Novato, and between Novato and Santa Rosa, that regional service again is being replaced by the Smart train as the major regional provider in between Marin and Sonoma counties. So for Smart service, frequency and span of service is being increased. There will be 48 weekday trips and 24 weekend trips. That's representing a 19% overall increase in service. So that's 6 additional trips on the weekdays and 8 on the weekends. The span of service is also expanding about half an hour in the morning and so for the southbound, about half an hour in the morning and a little over an hour in the evening. And similar northbound, about half an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And so during the week, frequencies will be between about half an hour to an hour, and weekends an hour most of the day, with some periods of about 104 minutes. So the commute routes in Sonoma County, there are currently 3, the 172, 172X, and 164. Those will be consolidated into one route following the Route 172 alignment, running more frequently and with 20 to 30-minute service during peak periods. And that is a commuter service that goes from Sonoma County directly to San Francisco during the weekdays. In Southern Marin and the East Bay, there will be some adjustments of service, streamlining routes in Southern Marin between San Rafael, Marin City, Sausalito, and San Francisco through adjustments to several routes. And on Golden Gate Transit Route 580 between San Rafael and the East Bay, there'll be a more direct route. So since the Route 101 is being truncated in Novato, and the last Smart train going north will leave Larkspur around 10 p.m. There will not be service as late at night as there currently is. The study found that there were very few people riding that and even fewer riding those late night buses on a regular basis. But to provide some additional time for riders to get used to this transition and also for the transit agencies to better understand those riders' needs and potential alternatives. There will be a transitional late night bus service from the launch of Mascot service through the end of June. And they'll be provided by Sonoma County Transit. And it will essentially be an extension of their existing Route 44 that goes south and currently ends at the Petaluma Transit Mall. That bus will continue on to the Novato hub and will meet the northbound Route 101 bus in Novato, and then we'll continue back on with an express route going north and stopping in Petaluma, Rohnert Park, and Santa Rosa. Regional paratransit will continue with the truncation of the Route 101 in Novato. There's no longer an obligation to provide paratransit service between Sonoma County and Marin County, or Sonoma County and San Francisco, or Sonoma County and the East Bay. But the Mascots agencies are committed to maintaining the service. And so that will be continued and continue to be provided by Marin Access. The service areas and the fares will not be changed during the 3-year Mascots pilot period. And the hours will align with the Sonoma County paratransit operators. And we will revisit this commitment to deliver and fund the service before the end of the 3-year Mascots pilot period. So recommendations in the plan for local bus connections to SMART were to improve those connections, really focusing on SMART as the core regional transit provider. And per recommendation in Mascots, Sonoma County Transit Route 20 now connects directly with the Santa Rosa Downtown Smart Station. And Santa Rosa City Bus, Sonoma County Transit, and Petaluma Transit are all currently studying opportunities to make stronger and more direct connections to SMART. So as I mentioned earlier, new schedules are being published sometime this month. I'm thinking in the next week or two. Information sheets are currently being finalized, and notifications will be sent through the various channels that the transit operators regularly use and the riders are used to looking at. And the customer service will be ready to support with trip planning. Golden Gate is currently interviewing riders on those 2 last Route 101 trips and trying to get a better sense of, how what those riders' needs are, how frequently they use the service, whether they have different alternatives to the service. And so we will, please do expect those final information materials and final schedules to be coming out from James to you all via email in the next couple of weeks. We would love for your help in distributing the information, making sure that everybody is aware of these changes. The mascotsplan.org website will continue to be available as a resource for the plan and the bigger concept of all of these changes, while riders will likely continue to just look at their transit agency for schedules and the places they are used to finding that information. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you so much, and very exciting to see these changes coming forward. When you roll out the final schedule and it's being shared with us, are we also going to receive some communications toolkit of things we can be sharing in the right language and pointing to the right links?
Yeah, absolutely. In addition to the schedules, there are some kind of one-pager information sheets that are being put together, and those will be a good overview of the changes that are happening.
Great, thank you. Director Kidder Thompson.
make a suggestion that it goes to the cities? And so maybe on their web pages that we can have a new area that says transit and changes or whatever it would say? Because I've been talking about this, a few times during council comment, and it would be great if I could direct people. So appreciate that.
Director Lowe.
Is there any consideration to encourage at least maybe once or twice a day, don't know, a direct line from Sonoma to Petaluma Smart Station? With, because it's a 45-minute bus ride fairly infrequently, but it happens. But, as we all know, it's really about 15 minutes from downtown Sonoma to Petaluma. And since there's we've talked a lot about transit today along the 101 corridor, but the east-west is where things get really jammed up. We talked about Highway 37, et cetera. I think there's a lot of people in Sonoma Valley that would be taking the train if there were a direct bus route to connect. I mean, obviously, it'd be great to have, an east-west train. In the future, we'll aspire to have that. But right now, and this is something residents in Sonoma have brought up, and I think even in one of these meetings, someone called in about it. So there is a desire. I mean, it could perhaps be a pilot to see if people would do it, but back in the day, there's a lot of people in the city of Sonoma that work in San Francisco. Always has been. It's just kind of been that. And there used to be so many like private buses that would leave every day to go to the city and back. And so I think there's probably still quite a few people that would avail themselves of that and would reduce some of that traffic on notorious Highway 37. So that's my 2 cents about that. Thank you.
Are we still looking at potential expansion of additional routes? Is that a conversation? I mean, obviously not at this time for what's rolling out next month, but is the mascots and the integration, should this conversation kind of move towards maybe our transit ad hoc and talking about where we need to see increased route improvement for the broader community?
Yeah, we will be engaging with the transit ad hoc on an ongoing basis, specifically around the studies that Sonoma County Transit is working on, and Santa Rosa City Bus is also working on a study right now. And pieces of those studies are going to be focused on how to better serve SMART, so really related to that mascot's recommendation. And we will be continuously talking with the transit ad hoc about those studies.
Okay, great. I mean, I just don't want Director Lowe's comments to fall on deaf ears. I think we're hearing a lot about the 101 and the cities along the 101, and we have 2 jurisdictions that are not on the 101 and a ton of county residents who are not, adjacent. And so I think, how do we figure out how we are becoming much more 101 centric, it feels like, in a lot of the work we do and in a lot of the ways that MTC and ABAG are looking at our county, but knowing that our county is unique. I'm sure every county thinks that they're unique, but ours is really unique because we have the coast and we have Sonoma and we have a lot because we are. And we've really prioritized, how to have 9 incorporated jurisdictions, but then, how do we support everyone who's supporting our economy in the unincorporated, especially our agricultural workers and everyone in that industry. And so I just think as we continue to move it forward, this is very exciting, but then also we know that we aren't gonna be able to serve everyone. This is the first step, I feel like, and we have to treat it that way and this is not the destination. No transit pun intended. Okay, so yes, Vice Chair Corsi.
Thanks. And that is the intention, part of the intention of the whole mascots plan is for Santa Rosa City Bus and Sonoma County Transit to use the additional frequency along the 101 corridor, along the SMART corridor, to improve connections on the east-west access. So more to come on that. I just want to appreciate the tremendous amount of cooperation and collaboration that has gone into this effort by all involved. That includes Sonoma County Transit and Santa Rosa City Bus, but this is not a small lift. For all of this to come together, the Sonoma County Transit going to Novato late at night, continuing paratransit to areas where we're actually not responsible anymore. For SMART to increase its service by 19%. That is no small feat right there. That includes additional employees, additional workload, additional shifts. We'll be changing our shift pattern. It's a big lift for everybody involved. And it also involves moving funds around, which may be the hardest part of all. Some people had to let go, and I appreciate that also. So looking forward to next month, looking forward to the work that keeps going on after that as well.
So incredibly well said. And I do want to thank our staff and your partnership and the leadership of the people on this board representing multiple jurisdictions. This really is a generational shift. The last time we shifted these funds was 1996. So think about what you were doing in 1996. Hopefully you were not sitting at this table. I was in 8th grade, I think. So it's exciting. It's really huge. And I'm grateful that you all have been really instrumental in bringing it to this point. And I think it's on us to communicate with our constituents and get people, our residents can no longer say transit doesn't work for me. The bus only comes once an hour, or the train only comes once an hour, because we're reducing those headways really dramatically and bringing transit that hopefully will serve all of our residents. And for those that it's not serving, you're next. And so I really feel like this is a huge opportunity, but it's on us to really get the word out to our communities that this is happening and try to get them on board, literally and figuratively. Director Rabbit, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I feel like I'm on the already on a tour, but Mascots was a direct result of the Network Management. I think I was the first chair of that at MTC after being chair of programming allocations. And it was a response to COVID and the 27 transit agencies in the Bay Area, which quite honestly are entirely too many. It came about because there was no state support of transit. So each individual entity like Golden Gate, like SMART, went ahead and launched their own taxing scheme and support the funding for that. Originally, it was to consolidate some of those agencies, and I still think that ultimately is on the horizon at some point. It was pulled off the table. I think a little bit prematurely. I'm not talking specifically about Sonoma County's 3. I'm talking about many that are in the East Bay. But I do think that there's opportunities in the future to coordinate and collaborate. And this was the first step. And I was proud to be there to get a pilot, which became Mascots on the 101 corridor so that we can prove the concept here before it gets pushed off to other corridors in the East Bay or down the peninsula. So great work, and thank you for all the support.
Okay, we'll head to public comment. Anyone in the room wishing to make public comment, please approach the podium. Seeing none, we'll head over to Zoom, and it looks like we have 2 speakers. We'll start with Eris Weaver and then Tom Conlon, followed by someone in too small of print that I can't read, but Dawn will let us know when we get there. Eris, go ahead. It's like an eye exam up there.
Hi, I didn't see the thing to, can you hear
You're
me?
good to go. We can hear
Okay, great. I'm speaking now not as a representative of the Bicycle Coalition, but as an individual who rarely drives and uses not just my bicycle, but public transit. I don't know how many of you in the room use public transit at all or ever or frequently or regularly. I totally support this whole working towards consolidating agencies and making things fit more together. Every time you have to change systems or change routes, it makes your trip longer and harder to manage. So there's a lot that I really like about going through with this. I've been a little frustrated that schedules haven't been published yet. I think it will take a while from when they're published for people to start getting them and figuring out how, oh, well, I used to catch the bus here. Now I have to catch the train there. And in some cases, that might be a challenging shift for some folks. And I agree with the folks who've mentioned, why are we need more transit going east and west, because there is it's very hard to get out to the Sonoma Valley or out to the West County without a vehicle. My biggest sort of challenge or concern is with the late night service within the county. I know that this particular piece of the whole thing is looking at the commute stuff between the two counties, but at least from what I've been able to see that's been out about potential schedule changes, I think there is still not going to be as late a service. That last Golden Gate Transit southbound was the only way for anybody even within the county to get southbound. And I don't think that the additional train is going to go as late as that last Golden Gate did. But again, because there's not a full schedule published yet, I can't really tell if that's true. I'm really confused by the whole 2-month interim thing. That how, first of all, the way at least it was written up and the way I was looking at it, it was very confusing to me what was actually going to happen, where it was going when. But I'm unclear as to why it's even happening. Doing something having people change for 2 months what they're doing, and then have to change again when the 2 months is over seems weird to manage for your daily transportation life. But I'll stop right there. Thanks for working on this issue.
Thank you. Next up is Tom Conlon.
Thank you. Tom Conlon here, Sonoma Valley, speaking as an individual this afternoon. Appreciate the conversation today. We covered a lot of ground, a lot going on. Someone used the phrase best practices earlier, and thinking too about Chris Barney's presentation on the draft comprehensive transportation plan. I wanted to ask a question. I noticed in Dana's slides that the smart train is going to be going to a 32 or 64-minute headway. And my understanding is that initially the system was designed on a kind of best practice around clock phase scheduling, which allows transit agencies to plan on sort of the same time of the clock. Each of the bus schedules, much easier for people to learn how to use and build into their lifestyles. So I'm curious, is SMART, and is it our plan to abandon the clock phase schedule? I didn't see anything about that in the draft CTP, and I haven't heard that discussed in the mascots discussions to date. I know some stakeholders around the Bay Area have commented on this, but I haven't heard any discussion really coming out of this board or of staff. So I just asked that question. Maybe today's premature to be handling it, but I do hope we get the chance to talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dawn, can you tell us who our next speaker is? So Dan Bell, go ahead, Dan.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I want to piggyback a little bit on what Eris Weaver was talking about with the late night transition period. It was mentioned that Golden Gate Transit is currently interviewing late night northbound bus passengers to see what their needs are. Now, will Sonoma County Transit be interviewing southbound late night passengers from Santa Rosa to understand the same?
We will answer the questions at the end. Anything else, Dan, before you conclude?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no additional hands raised, we'll bring it back. Dana, did you want to respond to any of those comments? I know some of, or questions, I know some of the information is known now, some is not yet known, but let me know your thoughts.
Yeah, I think in terms of, well, I'll start with the ones that we could check off. The SMART schedules, the 32 and 64-minute headways, that was not part of the mascot study. And regarding the interviewing of passengers for the late night service, part of the reason for that transitional service is to allow more time for that feedback. I would need to get back to you to find out details about whether both directions, to confirm whether both directions will be surveyed.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Any additional thoughts, Director Rabbit?
Just one quick, putting everything in perspective. I think it's great that we were able to do this, and I think it's great that everyone cooperated. And, those that call for more service also need to, the governor recently signed, I think it was AB 117 by Jesse
Argwin?
Argwin, my buddy Jesse, for a $590 million loan to keep a couple different agencies, Muni, BART, Caltrain, AC Transit, afloat for one fiscal year. It's a 12-year loan. The initial ask was $750,000. So they're getting less than what they initially asked. This is while they figure out a way to, not fall off the fiscal cliff, which so far has not necessarily been successful. And I only mention that because this I believe it takes some of that into account. And while we all would love additional service here and there and everywhere else, it all comes at a price, an incredibly high price that we're of funds that are seemingly unavailable. And that loan will have a negative impact, in my opinion, for the foreseeable future on transit dollars coming. We're lucky that our agencies are all solvent and, in good shape. And, contrary to some, probably not as dependent on fare box recovery as BART, for instance, that took a big hit that way. Golden Gate can rise and fall. We just cut the service. It's simple. You don't have the dollars coming in. You just don't spend it. But I just thought it'd be important to kind of, transit is still trying to figure out its path post-COVID with remote work and everything else.
Thank you. Well said. Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. We will be on the lookout for the incoming information about those schedule changes, the information toolkits, and then also we all are committing to being liaisons to our jurisdictions on helping them and our public information officers get this information out to our communities as well. So thank you. Okay, our next item is our favorite topic, the Brown Act, and we're having Ross come up to talk to us about some potential changes for our teleconferencing and others. Ross.
Thank you. Good afternoon, directors. It's my favorite topic too. Got a presentation coming up. As that comes up, basically this is a brief update on recent changes to the Brown Act related to teleconferencing and meeting participation. Specifically related to Senate Bill 707, which updates how public agencies like SCTCA can allow remote participation in meetings. So I'll go through the main provisions, how they apply to us and our advisory committees, and the actions being requested from the board today. We can go manual. So the Brown Act, as you know, is main purpose is to ensure transparency in governmental decision-making by requiring that meetings are open, accessible to the public, and that the public has an ability to participate. Both this board and all of our advisory committees that are public are subject to the Brown Act. Let's jump there. So SB 707, this bill creates a more unified framework for remote participation while also giving additional flexibility for advisory bodies and multi-jurisdictional agencies like SCTCA. That's what this board is. And the provisions of this law are currently authorized through January 1st, 2030. So teleconferencing options. So under SB 707, there are now several ways that board or committee members can participate. So there are still the traditional teleconferencing rules and options, as well as the just cause participation options which were added by AB 2449. And this law also allows additional flexibility for advisory committees and helps us just maintain participation while still meeting transparency requirements. And I just right in the middle like to give a shout out to Corey for helping with all these details because yeah, we'll get into the details here. So eligible bodies, basically to qualify, a committee must be created by a legislative body, serve in an advisory role, and not take final action on legislation, contracts, or funding. So there's also some restrictions for committees focusing on areas such as elections, budget, police oversight, or taxes. However, we have determined, legal has determined that our advisory committees are eligible to take advantage of this new law. And these are the advisory committees that qualify. TAC, CAC, Transit Paratransit, CVPAC, Transit TAC, PAC, and CAAC, as we usually call them. And, oops, that's a duplicate. So basically the requirements, if a committee chooses to do this, and each committee does need to have a vote, have an action to make this happen. These requirements must be followed. Basically, it's got to be approved at an in-person meeting. A physical public meeting location must still be provided with staff present, and meetings must allow two-way participation. We already have that set up. Transparency rules do apply, so remote members must appear on camera, disclose if there's other adults in the room, and voting must be by roll call. And a big one is if remote access fails and suddenly you lose a bunch of folks, the committee cannot take action. So there is some, political, potential downfalls. But however, we've had pretty stable technology. And so multi-jurisdictional bodies, which this board is, there's some additional flexibility here. Because the board includes members from multiple jurisdictions, the provisions can help reduce barriers, help meeting attendance, and maintain quorum. To use this for this board, the board must adopt a resolution. A quorum must be physically present at the meeting location. So that is different than the advisory committees. You do have to have a quorum in the room for this board. Remote members, which would be listed on the agenda and located more than 20 miles away from the meeting location, could participate by audio and video. SCTCA members could use this meeting for up to 2 meetings a year, and all votes must be by roll call. So you can kind of think of this as a expansion of the AB 2449 legislation. So what we are asking today, asking the board to take 2 actions. The first is to adopt a resolution approving the use of the multi-jurisdictional teleconferencing option for SCTCA. And second, to adopt the resolution authorizing eligible advisory committees to use SB 707 provisions as well. So each advisory committee would, as mentioned, would still need to approve it individually. And we are hoping to bring these approvals to committees later this month and into April, depending on the schedule. And this authorization must be renewed every 6 months. So you may see this coming up again. And with that, well, thank you for your time and open it up to questions. And I may rely on Corey as necessary. Thank you for being here.
Great, thank you. Directors, any questions? Yeah, Director Lowe and then Harvey.
This thing works. Do you have to set the 2 meetings in advance? In other words, when you approve your calendar for the year, or is this something that can be done sort of on an ad hoc basis? Let's say it's a bad storm or road closure or something.
So I don't believe so, but I do believe that it does need to be noticed. So it would be,
right. So
the regular Brown Act 72-hour guidelines, although we try to get our agendas out a week before. I think if you're dealing with emergencies, storms, road closures, et cetera, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the original AB 2449, like Just Cause,
right.
could be utilized there, which would not require the noticing.
Understood. Yeah, I'm just wondering, I'm seeing this thing, it's a twice a year or something like that. So I didn't know if those had to be like decided, what was the advance notice? I mean, I understand about the, emergency situation.
I don't believe it needs to be determined in advance.
And that's correct. You don't have to decide when you're setting the calendar, but you need to let SCTCA know with enough notice for them to be able to include that you're appearing remotely on the agenda. You don't have to disclose the location.
Well, I will say that the one addition just related to traditional teleconferencing is this is different than doing, making your home a public location. So this is not allowing the public into your home.
Right. No, I understand. My question is, I mean, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but it said that you could do this twice a year or something. I'm just asking if those 2 twice a year meetings need to be approved, like with the calendar, or if they can be month to month. Let's do it this next month. We decide, next month looks miserable or something.
And it's on an individual basis, is that correct? So
it's an individual basis. It's not for the body as a whole. You still need a quorum present, physically present. Right.
And I think just based on our protocol, knowing that the 72-hour requirement is a Brown Act requirement for publishing, but our agenda publishes a week in advance, how we want to try to do it, if we move forward with adopting this policy, how we'd want to do it procedurally, and if it's possible, for example, say we publish a week in advance, and then one of our directors realizes that they aren't able to make it here in person due to a childcare issue, and they're residing over 20 miles away. Can we then, more than 72 hours in advance, notify our clerk and then she republishes? Or do we need to identify this more than a week in advance so that it goes out when the main agenda goes out? And is that just a procedural question on how we want to administer it?
That is definitely a procedural question on how you want to administer it with respect to dealing with staff's ability to do an addendum, but you definitely could do that from a legal standpoint as long as you met the 72 hours. One point of clarification, though, is this is in addition to Just Cause. So you would
always have Just Cause.
So you would have Just Cause, but you're limited to 2, and you're limited to 2 based on the number of times a year that you all meet, or times a month that you all meet as this body. So you would have potentially 2 Just Cause options and 2 remote participation options, being as long as you're more than 20 miles away. So the childcare example that qualifies as Just Cause. So you wouldn't need to have that on the agenda ahead of time. That was as soon as you would know, you would let staff know, and then we would announce it at the
Terrible example. You realized you had another meeting that was an in-person meeting, like say your council's meeting in Cloverdale at 5 p.m. and you can't be in both places at once.
Great example.
Okay,
That
and
would be your
Director Harvey,
opportunity,
you
as long as you hadn't already used two. So that's the issue. Yeah.
great, Director Harvey. Okay, perfect. Additional questions, comments? Okay, we'll take it to the public. Any members of the public wishing to comment in person, please approach the podium, and then we will transition to Zoom public comment. Please raise your hand. Seeing no one approaching the podium, we'll go to Zoom. Seeing no hands raised, we will bring it back. And so this is an action item to consider the adoption of these policies, and I'm happy to entertain a motion.
Make the motion.
So we have two resolutions here. We have a resolution.
Yeah, I'll
Okay,
make a motion
Director
to move.
Duche.
Adopt resolution SCTA 2026-004 and RCPA 2026-002, approving the use of teleconferencing for meetings pursuant to government code section 54953.8.7.
I'll second that.
We have a motion by Director Giudice and a second by Director Cater Thompson. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And we do have a second resolution on this same item, which is the authorization of our subsidiary bodies, like those that were listed on the slide, to allow them to have this same teleconferencing provision. Is there a motion?
I'm happy to move that forward as well. That would be resolution 2026-003 for SCTA and RCPA 2026-001, authorizing eligible subsidiary bodies to use teleconferencing for meetings pursuant to government sections code 94953.8.6.
I'll second that.
So I have a motion by Director Giudice and a second by Director Cater Thompson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now we are on to item 5.6, which is our appointments to the ad hoc committees. Do you want to mention what we're doing here, Director Cameron?
Yep, thank you. So we have two ad hoc committees that staff recommended at the last meeting. The first is the Transit Implementation Ad hoc that would provide input on implementation and coordination of SCTCA's transit-related plans and studies. We also have the Climate Strategy Ad hoc that would provide input on our climate mobilization strategy update. At the February 9th meeting, Chair Kelly solicited interest from the SCTCA directors, and SCTA directors Corsi, Okrepke, Cater, Thompson, Hinton, and Giudice expressed interest in the Transit Implementation Ad hoc. Directors Hopkins, Giudice, and Leap expressed interest in the Climate Strategy Ad hoc. With that, I'd pass it back to you, Chair, to make recommendations for the two ad hocs for 2026.
Okay. Thank you very much. So in addition to the members that were mentioned, I'm interested in serving on both of those two subcommittees for transit implementation and climate strategy. We do have an additional 2 seats available before we hit the tricky requirement on. So for the climate strategy ad hoc, are there any directors interested in joining that committee? Okay. It is going to be a lot of fun. You're missing out. So with that, I'd be happy to accept. Oh, sorry, we need to go to public comment on this item. Any members of the public wishing to make comment, please approach the podium or raise your hand in Zoom. Seeing none in person and seeing none on Zoom, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt the membership of our 2 ad hoc committees for transit implementation, directors Corsi, Okrepke, Cater, Thompson, Hinton, Giudice, and Kelly. And for the climate strategy ad hoc, directors Hopkins, Giudice, Leap, and Kelly.
So moved.
Second.
Oh, it's a tie. We'll go to Director Lands. So we have a motion by Director Harvey and a second by Director Lands. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. And then we are moving on to our market or our reports. So you'll notice for this committee meeting, and we'll just mention it, and it will be changing for next month. We have our reports and announcements. Sorry if I'm stealing your thunder, but we're going to consolidate these on the agenda for future reports and announcements, with the goal that we are always going to conclude by 5 p.m., fingers crossed, but that's also on us, to get us to the meetings that we all have to get to after this. But we'll start with our executive committee report and then roll right into the subsequent ones. But I do want to just mention, sometimes these have really great media information and they're all going to be written reports in the packet. So make sure that you always get to them when reading, even if we don't get to them for presentations. And Executive Director Cameron, thank you.
Great. So kicking it off with the executive committee report, we discussed today's agenda. Please take a look at that briefing book link. Also, let us know if you have any conflict of interest properties that you would like staff to review, and let you know if we identify potential conflicts in each board agenda. The 3 directors that we do have addresses on file, we will continue those on file and continue checking those. You'll also likely see in a future briefing book that we would like a couple weeks notice when you're going to miss the meeting under the provision, but we can make it work. If it's just over 72 hours or an additional day, we can typically make that work with our staff here. We also discussed the Sonoma Wildfire Resiliency Project that will be going to the county in April, especially the component where it includes coordination on climate resilience and adaptation, and what potentially our role could be here at the SCTCA. Briefly discussed legislative advocacy, focusing on our return on investment for both the bike share and our climate bond focus, and currently not taking any bill positions, but are monitoring several, and will come back on future agendas with potential support or opposed positions on various SBs or ABs. Please reach out to me if you have any bills that you would like to see SCTCA take positions on. And then we had a brief update on upcoming items, and that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, regional agency reports. Director Giudice.
Sure, why not, since David didn't jump in. The district obtained a $26 million grant for the San Rafael Transit Center. We're very excited about that. And the district owns about 70 acres of land just south of the Larkspur Ferry Terminal that was initially supposed to be used for dredging in the old days when we created the channel there. And we've been engaged in a restoration project, and actually there is now a whole tidal. We've actually built a little channel that comes into the marsh area there outside of Larkspur, and we're doing restoration work there. So it's a pretty exciting project and very unique for the district to be engaging in something like that. So that's the update. I can share it with anyone if they're interested.
I just looked it up on a map. That's fascinating. Thank you. Any other regional agency reports? Okay. Then we have advisory committees linked in the packet, and then we also now have Ross. Anything on advisory committees before we move on to our SCTA, RCPA activities reports, and we'll start with Ross on marketing communications.
Good afternoon, directors. So very brief update for marketing communications. The SCTCA combined annual report was released as you approved earlier. There are some limited physical copies if you are interested. Spanish version inbound. I just got the translation today, so we'll have a Spanish version as well. Looking forward to some robust engagement surrounding Earth Day. Quite a few activities coming up, so we'll be out in the community. And the HOV lane sign updates have been completed along the 101 corridor. And lastly, there will be a Lakeville corridor open house on March 24th. At the Miwok Charter School in Petaluma. So I will leave it at that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, directors. I'm giving the climate change activities report highlights. There's 2 items I'd like to share with you. First, to let you know that we have started our GHG inventory update for the 2024 data. And one area that we are working on this year is to be able to separate out the electricity usage from our building energy usage, so that you'll be able to see that separately. BC is working on how best to do that, but that's a change for this year. And then the second area I wanted to highlight is for the Bay Ren Business Refrigerant Replacement Program. This is a program that's designed for small food and floral businesses that have been underserved by other programs, particularly those in low income and disadvantaged communities. So far in this program, there have been 8 projects completed in Sonoma County with additional projects scheduled for installation. And I want to highlight that a case study was published, and there's a link in your activities report to that study. And this study highlights the Bodega Country Store's participation in the program, which I think is pretty cool. The owner wanted help addressing rising utility bills and maintenance costs for their walk-in cooler that had a 20-year-old refrigeration system. And so the services provided by the program were rebates and technical assistance for a new remote condensing unit, evaporator coils, and other equipment. The program covered 80% of the costs. And in terms of the benefits, the store owner will save an estimated $450 in utility costs each year. The new refrigerant will reduce GHG emissions by about 1,300 pounds per year. And the program also supported the owner in free maintenance training on the new equipment. So just wanted to highlight that success story, and I'll pass it on to Steph.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So for our planning activities report, as seen on the consent agenda, staff provided an RFP for a transportation demand management platform that will be issued March 13th. This will replace the expiring contract with Right Amigos. Staff are also working with jurisdictions to update their general plan build-out scenarios, and a general plan build-out serves as a blueprint to analyze future impacts on infrastructure, population growth, and housing needs, and is primarily used for SEQA purposes. Finally, staff are also currently updating the disadvantaged communities maps.
Thank you. David?
Good afternoon, Chair and Directors. David Rivera, Director of Project Program at SCTCA. Just to give you a couple updates on a couple of key funding programs. Next week at their meeting in Malibu, the California Transportation Commission will be adopting the 2026 State Highway Operations Protection Program and also the 2026 State Transportation Improvement Program. Both of those are major funding programs. The board did provide comments on the draft 2026 SHOP, and those comments have been responded to by Caltrans in your board packet. For the STIP, we are having new programming for the State Route 121 East Street East Intersection Improvement Project, and we are working with Caltrans and the county to help secure other competitive funds to fully fund that project. In addition to that, staff have been working with Congressman Thompson's office and will be working with Senator Padilla and Senator Schiff's office to request earmark funding for the 121 East Street East project. And staff also last week supported a number of projects throughout the county for other appropriations requests. So we are supporting any projects that are moving forward, and we are continuing to look for other sources of funding for other capital projects. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anything else on the reports? Directors, any questions? Okay, we'll go to public comment on the reports. We'll start with anyone in the room and then head over to Zoom. If anyone's on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature if you want to make comment. Seeing none in person, we'll go to Zoom. Seeing none on Zoom, we'll close public comment, bring it back. Any further comments on the reports? Thank you so much. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you for the